When it comes to R35 Nissan GTR racing, there's two standout competitors that have a huge fan following. First of all, we've got the AMS built Alpha G, which was the first GTR to ever go into the sixes, and then we've also got the silver ETS car, which currently is a little bit quicker than the Alpha G car. Now, we're going to start by addressing the elephant in the room. The old Alpha G car is now running under ETS ownership, and we've got it behind us here. It's now the ETS-G. I want to start here, JR, by addressing that elephant. It wasn't an AMS car, it's now an ETS car. I know that both shops have a massive and loyal fan following, and I know there's a lot of rumour and speculation out there about what exactly has happened. So let's give you the opportunity to clear the air and tell us what's going on.
All right, well basically, there's obviously been a big and ongoing rivalry where the two large shops in the country for GTRs, the Alpha G, which was raced by AMS with Gidi, was Gidi's car. They were wrenching it, and you know, for the last couple years we've had kind of a rivalry, and it was always to be the first to the sixes. So last year they were successful in first to the sixes, and that was with them and Gidi, with that same car that's behind us. But I don't know exactly the internal thing of what was going on with
We definitely won't get into the politics here.
Yes. But basically, for whatever reason, after they achieved their goal, they wanted to part ways, both Gidi and them. I'm not sure, mutual or not, but basically, you know, later, I guess that would have been 2 years ago, I got a phone call from Gidi, and he said, hey, I'm parting ways with AMS, and I'm wondering if you guys want to take on this car. At the same time, we were going through something with Lucas, who drives our silver car, and he's having kind of some, I guess, life philosophy changes, where he's not certain he wants to drive anymore. So on one hand, I'm losing a driver of the silver car, which I like and fully trust. And then I also have an opportunity to, I guess, work with the car that did beat us to the sixes. And then as well, get a look inside what my competitors have been doing. So we were able to work out a deal with Gidi where we purchased the car from him. And then the caveat with that is that he would be the exclusive driver of that car for a period of time, and his stipulation was he wanted the G on it for Gidi. That's the deal. So that is why we call it the ETS-G. You know, there's a little bit of me that I don't know exactly what I think about that, because the Alpha G was original, rolled off the tongue. That's the ETS-G, but we're upholding our end of the bargain. It's his stipulation.
I just want to back up a little bit here because, as I've mentioned, obviously both shops have a massive and loyal fan base following, and I think, as I see so often out there in the motorsport arena, these fans end up thinking that there is a lot of battle between the shops themselves, and often that's not the case. And what we do need to respect here is that competition is so healthy because it makes all of the shops push harder, and I'm guessing that probably if you and AMS weren't pushing, it would have taken a lot longer to see a 6-second pass anyway. Obviously that's now been well and truly eclipsed, so really it is actually all good for the R35 market. Now, on taking over ownership of the new car, obviously I'm going to assume you aren't running an AMS package in it now, so can you tell us what you've actually changed?
Yeah, so basically, and that was actually something we did out of respect to them as well. Motor and turbo kit was sold out of the car. We actually didn't even look in the motor. But it has our turbo, our engine, our whole drivetrain package and suspension setup. So basically, the main reason we went here with this car is because our silver car was doing double duty. It was doing drag race and half mile. And there is a substantially different setup now between those two. It used to be that setup wasn't much different, but as the cars became 6-second cars, it is different. So we also saw the opportunity to have a dedicated car for drag and then a car for half mile. And you will see the silver car with Lucas that will be ran at the half-mile event.
Can you just come back to that and tell us, maybe just in brief terms, what you are changing between a half-mile setup and a quarter-mile setup? Because I think it's sort of assumed that you could do double duty in the car and it's not going to compromise things. Obviously, that's not the case.
Yeah, so there's some suspension settings, shock settings and suspension. One is the half-mile. You're not torquing the car a lot, so it's a more symmetrical setup. Drag, there's a lot of torque, torquing of the chassis out of the line, so it's a more asymmetrical setup. On the engine, we changed a little bit of the fueling system for the half mile, and then the wing and aerodynamics a little bit as well. And then also just in half mile, we don't have to be worried so much about weight. So we also want to end up with the silver car of putting it back to more of a street car setup. We're struggling with that right now because everybody has seen it as a drag car, a full race car. So the question becomes, we want to be able to run the half mile with a street car, a car that we drive to a hotel, then drive to the event and run it hard. So do we put the silver car back to street trim, or do we build a whole nother car? But the silver car has such a following that, man, we want to just keep going with it.
Yeah, it'd be a shame to park that up and not compete anymore. Now, getting into some of the technical specifications of the ETS-G, you've said you're running your own engine now and turbo kit. Can we start by talking about that turbo kit? What are you actually running on the car?
So they're Precision 8586s.
Now, one of the things we quite often get questions about with the Precision turbos is that in the aftermarket performance turbo arena, they're probably one of the few manufacturers now that don't provide turbo compressor maps. And I know a lot of people rely on these with turbo sizing. Obviously, it's not holding Precision back. They're one of the key choices, particularly in the likes of the Pro Mod world. How does that affect you with your turbo choice not having compressor maps?
Well, basically, what we see if we were to map any of these vehicles out here is that you would be running at the far right of the map, meaning you're not really anywhere close to the efficiency island per se. What the industry requires from turbo kit builders and turbo manufacturers is basically just spool versus power. So you're looking for actually, instead of the most efficient turbo, the industry demands the smallest turbo for a given amount of power. And then I would say that once everybody went to billet compressor wheels, and just over the last 5 years, all the turbos have become very efficient everywhere. So we don't really care so much about the map, because anytime we try to map it, it's nowhere close to the island. If we do build a setup with a map turbo where you're running in the island, that is a very laggy setup. So you end up with something that spools at like 7,000 RPMs on a 2-liter. Still will make very good peak power, but it's almost undrivable.
That actually brings me back to the next point as well, is obviously turbo sizing for a street application or even a circuit application, vastly different to what we can get away with in a drag application, particularly now with these dual clutch transmission gearboxes, which essentially keep the turbos on boost. You're never closing the throttle down the line. As long as you can actually get boost at the start line, that's really one of the keys. So how do you sort of work out turbo sizing for a drag application? What's your own philosophy around that?
Well, basically, we used to have to work that out around having a turbo that we actually could spool on the line, and having a turbo that, if we have a big gear split between first and second, doesn't fall out of boost going into second. That was a couple years ago, and that was before I think everybody knew how to make giant turbos spool in neutral on any size engine. So now we basically still go with the smallest turbo that we need for the power, but we can go bigger than a street or circuit car just because we never shift. So pretty much we go with the appropriate turbo for what we're trying to do for power. Spooling it is not too big of an issue. We have a fairly elaborate protocol to get the turbo on boost and neutral. And what that consists of is that basically we have a launch target RPM and manifold pressure. And if we are off of either one of those, it will add RPM. So what basically happens is to get an 86 millimeter turbo to basically come up to roughly 20 pounds of boost sitting in neutral within a short amount of time, we overshoot the target launch RPM by maybe 2,000 RPMs. Then, as it builds manifold pressure, we bring that RPM down. And then we end up at a sustained boost in RPM. It also works well because if we have a problem staging or the driver is caught by surprise and he hasn't built the appropriate amount of boost, we will make up for that with RPM. It won't be the perfect launch, but it won't be a totally bad bogged launch.
That's quite a smart strategy. So you're just using additional RPM there to basically supply more exhaust gas energy to initially get the turbo spooling. And of course, once the turbo starts to spool, it sort of continues so you can pull that RPM back. And I think the point you've just mentioned there as well is one that's often overlooked. These cars, while they are out to set drag racing records, if you want to also race them and win against the competitor in the other lane, you also need to be able to pull a light. So being able to get that car on boost quickly on the tree is essential. Now, one of the other aspects with the R35 chassis is that dual clutch transmission, the transaxle on the back, and it's a blessing and potentially a curse. We've all known about the expense and the complexity of building one of these to take 3,000 plus horsepower. But I'm also interested to get a little bit of insight into what it takes to actually get one of these cars to go down the track to 60 foot. So can you tell us about the four-wheel drive system? And for a start, let's talk about the front-wheel drive component of that and how you're using that to your advantage.
Okay, so basically, well, yeah, so the cars are four-wheel drive. If we run these cars without four-wheel drive, and we have because we've ended up in race situations where we've smoked the four-wheel drive, can't fix it, they end up running about a 130, 133 60 foot. With the four-wheel drive, you see most cars out here in the 120 60 foots, 125, 122. This car, our last 8 consecutive launches have all been below 1.20, so 118, 119. Basically, we are four-wheel drive from the beginning. And so it just stays in four-wheel drive. Again, I guess four-wheel drive is kind of a misleading term. The front, it can only send about 300 horse to the front. So we have a constant, basically 300 horse worth at the front, and then the rest of the car is just doing the rest.
Now, we actually haven't talked about power figures from this engine, but in terms of overall power, how much is it making?
We've never ran this one to 3,000 on the dyno, but our silver car, same setup, we had 3,050 basically on the dyno.
And that's wheel horsepower, not flywheel?
Yes, that's wheel horsepower.
So you're only essentially sending 10% of that overall power to the front?
Yeah, actually I would say, yes, exactly. We're sending 300 horse to the front. Whether or not we make 500 horse or 3,000, 300 goes to the front.
Yeah, so that really doesn't sound like it's doing that much, but for the non-drag racers out there, you're talking a tenth of a second to the 60 foot, and as a rough rule of thumb, doesn't always work out, but approximately a tenth at the 60 can equal about 2/10 at the end of the track. So anything you can make up there has a profound effect on the rest of the run. Is that fair?
Yes, and I mean, maybe we poo-poo the 300 horse a little bit, but 300 horse in a 240 is still a low 12 second, high 11 second car. So
not insignificant.
Yeah, it's not insignificant. And the most important part is it keeps the car straight as well. The front tires will spin slightly faster than the rears, so they're always pulling on the car, and that helps keep it straight.
All right, so you've talked about the front-wheel drive component there and the fact that the clutch essentially is that limiting factor for how much power and torque can be fed through to the front. But the other aspect here with the dual clutch transmission is not like a conventional manual transmission where you've got a large diameter clutch that you can slip off the line as the driver launches, and really that's one of the keys to getting a drag car to hook up off the line is a little bit of clutch slip as the car leaves so it doesn't just light up and go straight into wheel spin. Can you do the same with a dual clutch transmission?
Not on these. In fact, I would say the opposite. We actually have to light up and go right into wheel spin in order to launch these cars. So the deal is that right now the clutches on these cars, because we have to have so many frictions in there, the steels are real thin. And if we slip the clutch much off the line, it warps the steels. Then in the dual clutch tranny, when you warp the steels, the clutch drags and it cannot pre-select the next gear. The synchros can't overcome the dragging clutch. So basically how we launch these cars is we pretty much induce wheel spin from the beginning. And then that wheel spin, we catch it with basically a timer of RPM and map after launch. And then we able to ramp that in of RPM versus time after launch. I kind of call it, probably not the correct term, but an electronic torque converter. So we induce wheel spin, we catch it, and then we control it for X amount of time.
This is probably a good time to talk about the electronics package in the car, because between your launch strategy with building boost and the map versus RPM you've talked about, also that launch control strategy with the timer-based RPM and map, that requires some pretty smart electronics. So what have you got controlling the engine?
Yeah, so it's a Syvecs engine management, excellent unit. It's interesting because sometimes there's all different kinds of people with their opinions. I'm a big believer in it. And the irony here is that all the AMS cars have Syvecs as well. Excellent system. It can do pretty much anything we want. It can be daunting at first because there's so much stuff and information. But once you get comfortable with it and you get it down, I mean, it's kind of, the possibilities are endless.
Having used the Syvecs ECU ourselves as well, I know that a lot of tuners, when they're first faced with it, it seems like the user interface is quite different to anything else, the likes of the Motec, which a lot of the other GTRs here run. But knowing that we've talked to Syvecs about the reasoning behind that, and what they say is that the user interface is designed so that an engineer in the pits in a second can make any changes using one hand on the laptop. So it's got a really great keyboard shortcut system that makes it really easy to access everything, which is quite powerful. Now, just coming back to that launch strategy, so that takes care of the car straight off the line, and are you using any kind of traction control for the rest of the run?
Yeah, so, well, one thing too, before we get into traction control, the point I said about the front wheel drive pulling on the car, that's how you keep a car straight off the line when you start with wheel spin. So now as we go into traction control. So ideally we don't want to have traction control, but we use it as a safety, and also so that we can complete a pass without aborting it. So the neat thing about this is that how do you go with these huge turbos, and we can either call it dual 85 millimeter turbos on a 4 liter, or we can call it an 85 millimeter on basically a 2 liter. So traction control event, let's say we're in second gear or third gear and we're supposed to be at 7,200 RPM, blow the tires off, goes to 9,000. Okay, even as it starts to go to 9,000, that will happen in maybe 200 milliseconds. And the strategy is retard the ignition, and then this is where it gets tricky, because with methanol you have so much fuel. If it's still under control, you pull ignition, without pulling fuel, you'll hydraulic it. And so there's a deal of we retard first, and then when you retard the ignition, you're going to build more boost. So there needs to be a wastegate adjustment, which the Syvecs has. So retard ignition, adjust the wastegate, then if it's still not under control, pull fuel and pull ignition. And then you have to be pulling fuel and ignition on the same cylinders at the same time, but then they can't. It needs a randomizer, so if you do it again, you're not doing it to the same cylinders. And then ideally you don't pull enough fuel that you lose all the boost. So it's maybe not something, I mean, I'm proud of the tuning, but I'm not proud of having traction control events to get there. But we're able to, if we do have an event like that, we can go from out of control to back in control, and we've not lost boost, and we're back on target as far as boost, wastegate, and RPM within 150 milliseconds.
I think it's also worth mentioning here that in general terms, if you are relying on traction control, you're probably not on a world record pass, but where the advantage of that traction control comes in is, first of all, safety. You're not going to put the car into the wall. You're maybe not going to run a number, but you're not going to trash the car. And also, just as importantly, if you're racing another car, you still have the option or the chance of potentially beating the guy in the other lane. Is that reasonable?
Yes, that's reasonable. And we have ran multiple 6-second passes with a traction control event as well. So it doesn't even, if we have an event in second or third gear, we will lose maybe a tenth and a half.
Okay, so I just come back to that as well because a lot of our listeners may not quite follow. So when you're talking about that wastegate adjustment, when you use the retard, that's a really nice way of dulling down the engine torque to try and regain power without necessarily inducing a cut, which is a little bit harsher. But of course, as you retard the timing, you put more heat energy into the exhaust system, and that's why it increases the boost. Is that reasonable to say?
Yes, that is, and that's one of the neat features that the Syvecs has, that a lot of guys don't even use, is that if you have to retard ignition for any reason, typically you will make more boost with a given wastegate duty. So there is a feature where if you retard ignition, it will mod the wastegate duty.
Because of course, if you retard the ignition, but you make more boost, because if you're making more boost, you end up with more power, so it kind of defeats what you're trying to achieve of reducing the engine torque in the first place. Let's just get back to the actual way you're deciding when the car is wheel spinning, because this is an issue we see with some four-wheel drive chassis. Generally with some four-wheel drive chassis, you've got a locked split from the front wheels to the rear. So essentially if the car wheel spins, then all four wheels are spinning. So it's impossible based on that to deduce that the car is actually traction limited. So is this a difference with the R35 due to that front torque transfer you were talking about?
Yeah, are you talking about how we define vehicle speed?
How you know if the car is wheel spinning, I guess is what I'm asking.
Yeah, so I guess that would be of what's truly how you're defining vehicle speed. So basically, we use speed across the front tires. These cars typically don't have the front tires off the ground very long. In fact, we don't allow traction control events to happen until second gear. So the only time we wheelie is in first gear. And it's just as simple as that.
So then you've got that front wheel speed to rear wheel speed split, or your vehicle speed to the rear wheel speed split. If the rear wheel speed spikes, then you know you've got wheel spin?
Yes.
Well, look, it's been great getting some insight into this car. Hopefully we've cleared up a few misconceptions. This was the only car that went into the sixes at GTR World Cup last year. We've still got 2 days of racing to go, and we're looking forward to seeing some fast passes. How fast do you see this going? Given that currently the GTR world record is in the 650 vicinity, what do you see on the cards for this?
Well, that record is a tall order, and the record holder, Rob Harper at Alpha Logic, he has a lot to be proud of with that. So I believe that our car, as it sits, I know it can do the 670s. So I'm hoping for a 660 here. So I feel we should be able to do 670s. I want a 660 because then that gives us the rest of the year to kind of hunt down that extra tenth. Again, you never know what's going to happen.
A tenth might not sound like very much, but when you're going this fast, every tenth takes a huge amount more power and a huge amount more preparation. Look, we wish you all the best and look forward to seeing how the car performs. Thanks for the chat.
All right, thank you. Always a pleasure.
If you like that video, make sure you give it a thumbs up, and if you're not already a subscriber, make sure you're subscribed. We release a new video every week. And if you like free stuff, we've got a great deal for you. Click the link in the description to claim your free spot to our next live lesson.